Warning: Title 17 U.S. Code 512F provides penalties for the deliberate misrepresentation of copyright infringement. The owners and authors of this video, the common denominator, and the Paramystic Broadcast Channel are a nonprofit 501c3 exempt organization and believes in good faith that it constitutes educational fair use, as per Title 17 U.S.C. 107. Persons, agencies, attorneys, and or social media algorithms filing a false or frivolous Digital Millennium Copyright Act complaint may be subject to civil liability. Warning: the following content may contain elements that are not suitable for some audiences. Accordingly, viewer discretion is advised.
I pledge my allegiance to the Constitution of the United States of America and to the republic for which the flag stands, and one nation under Almighty God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I always follow up with a quote because I think quotes are important. It's something that helps our disciplines and principles in life. But success is a state of mind. If you want success, start thinking of yourself as a success. Joyce Brothers. Success is a state of mind. If you want success, start thinking of yourself as a success. Joyce Brothers. Folks, I can't say this enough. I am so blessed to have these next two people on. I'm just going to get right into it. I do want to say, though, this is a Tuesday, and a tornado is going through our producer's literally in his town right now as I speak. I'm hoping that all is going to be safe. He may be joining us later. In the meantime, I'd like to bring Tom Martz, believe it or not, of the Lockheed and Smith Foundation, as well as Tanawah Downing. How are you, Tanawah?
I'm good, guys. How are you?
How are you, Tom?
I'm good.
You know, guys, I wanted you two people together so badly because I'm going to hope I'm going to have a bit of a break. I want you folks, you two, to exchange a bulk of this conversation in this time allotted, because I think you guys have so much to offer. So I know that Tanawah, I know you're on a mission. Why don't we tell everyone what that mission is about, please?
Man, you know, we got to get government under control, and we have to understand that if our government is our criminals, if they're acting outside of the established code of conduct agreed upon by the majority, the very laws that create their office and grant them their authority, then they're leading our country in the wrong direction. And we need to decide as a nation, do we want to follow criminals toward criminality, and thus we will ourselves become criminals, or do we want to go a different direction? And so I'm out here, and we're serving these attorney generals. We're preparing to have these oral arguments in the United States Supreme Court, Washington D.C. in June, and we need to put these public officials on notice, these chief legal officers within these states, let them know that what you're doing today is unconstitutional because you're not following the rules and parameters that's established in the Constitution, that you swore by oath or affirmation that you would fulfill, and put them on notice and give them a little bit of time to decide which side of the law they want to be on. Because once you're informed of a criminal conspiracy that exists, certainly a criminal conspiracy that exists within your institution by your own agents, when you've been made notice and put on notice for those, you have a choice. You can either choose to do nothing and thus become complicit due to your complacency, or you can do the right thing and hold criminals accountable for their crimes. I'm not saying trade one tyrant for another, but I am saying that if you are not following the rules in the very steps and procedures that are required for the adjudication of crime, then you're acting unconstitutionally, and that produces unconstitutional outcomes. So today, right now, there are more than 700,000 people across America that are imprisoned illegally and unconstitutionally because these states are failing to follow the procedures, processes required, codified in the Constitution, that they're guaranteed to these men. And as a result, when you fail to follow the constitutional requirements, what you produce is unconstitutional. So I'm out here fighting for those brothers and sisters to get them out of these institutions that we call sweatshops in China, but prisons here in America. Those brothers and sisters need to be back home. They need to receive love, support, compassion. They need to be taken care of as opposed to hurt and forced into involuntary servitude, so that we can trade on New York Stock Exchange on Geo-Group or Civic and CCNA. Thank you guys so much for having me.
So, Tom, I'd like you just heard what Tanawah had to say. I know this was a lot real quick because he talks fast.
Everybody said that.
What are your thoughts on this at the moment?
Well, first off, I feel underdressed. Here I am in a t-shirt, and he's over there in a suit and tie. So now I'm at a huge disadvantage.
Just so that you know, Tom, I'm about to meet with the Attorney General. As soon as it's over, we're going to be sitting down and serving the next one. That's who I dressed up for, not for Vincent. Not for Vincent.
Hey, but I do have a serious question though, and maybe you can walk people who aren't as educated through the experience and through what it is that you're attempting to do, because what I'm going to say is what generally people are thinking, and it's what people hear. You're actually serving the people, or you're serving the people with charges to let them know that they're in violation of their oath. So what makes you think that those people are going to do anything to limit themselves or to bring charges against themselves?
That's a great question, and it's a 100% valid question. I don't expect them to do anything. It's not part of my plan, because once again, this is about our leadership. It's about the leaders of the country. These attorney generals, they're not the leaders of the country. They're doing things unlawfully because their leaders are leading them unlawfully. So this is how we're going after the top, because I only have to fight one battle. I'm going after the Supreme Court and the illegality of it, the decisions it did make, the rulings that they put into place that they call law, administrative law, and that they require all these state courts to follow, which isn't law, because the courts of the judicial branch has no constitutional authority to be a great law. That's constitutionally codified into the legislative branch. But my point is that if I want to get the attention of the leaders, I need to start breaking up the alliances out here at the local level. So by going out here and providing this service on absolutely real and legitimate crimes. And so if you want, I can tell you where we're at. So the crime that I'm using, the specific right that's been abridged, is the indictment by a grand jury. Okay. And I'm using that as the mechanism to actually be heard by the court. Because again, there's 700,000 people across the United States of America today that did not receive an indictment by a grand jury, despite the fact that that is a requirement under Clause 1 of Amendment 5 to the United States Constitution. So Clause 1 of Amendment 5 says, no person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless on presentment or indictment of a grand jury. That's clear. You got to have an indictment by a grand jury before holding someone over, arresting them, and holding them over for trial for a capital or infamous crime. Now, an infamous crime is defined by Title 18, subsection 4083, as any crime punishable by more than 1 year imprisonment in penitentiary. So if you can get more than 1 year, that is infamous crime, and as a result, it must have an indictment by a grand jury before arresting and holding them over. However, Washington State is the primary respondent in our litigation. Washington State's Constitution, Article 1, Section 17 says, no grand jury shall be drawn as summoned in any county. So in the history of the state of Washington, they have never convened a grand jury. And as a result, they have never convicted a person legally and lawfully consistent with the procedure process of the Constitution, because the state of Washington believes that they can substitute their own alternative legislation for the provisions guaranteed in the Constitution, which they cannot. But the big deal is that it's not just Washington. There's 23 other states that do it, including Oklahoma, including Pennsylvania, including Connecticut, including Michigan. These are states that are acting in direct willful defiance of the United States Constitution. They are not doing what's required, constitutionally required, and as a result, when the state enacts its own alternative legislation and then directs its agents to follow that law to deprive a person of rights that's guaranteed by the Constitution, if that agent decides to do that, they just committed a crime, a felony. It's Title 18, subsection 242, deprivation of rights under color of law, which states any person who, under the authority of any state statute, ordinance, custom, or regulation, deprives any person of rights secured by the Constitution, commits that crime. So when a prosecuting attorney swears that he will support and defend the Constitution of the United States, but then relies upon an inferior state statute to deprive a person of a right that's guaranteed by the Constitution, they just committed a felony. So when that prosecuting attorney takes this information, right? Because Title 18, subsection 555, says that information can only be used for non-infamous crimes, for misdemeanors. So the law says to even the prosecutor, you cannot charge someone by way of information if it isn't a misdemeanor. That's what the law says. And yet they are choosing to do it anyway, in violation not only of the law, but in abuse of discretion and in violation of the oath they took with the Constitution of the United States. So when this prosecuting attorney takes this information after having committed this crime, using the incorrect charging instrument, and hands it to a judge and says, here, judge, I would like you to hold this person over for this offense, that judge has a duty and obligation to ensure that the power that they exercise is consistent with their authority. If they choose to exercise their power based upon someone else's abuse of power, then the power they exercise no power at all. So when that judge takes this charging instrument and says, looks good to me, I'm going to say probable cause is established, and I'm going to sign this, ordering that person arrested and held over for defense. Now we have a conspiracy to deprive of rights violating subsection 241, which states when two or more persons conspire for the purpose of depriving any person of the right to by a constitution, it's that crime. So then when this judge, after having signed this order for arrest, when he hands it to an officer and says, officer, I would like you to please go out and make this arrest on this individual. That officer has a duty and responsibility to ensure the power he exercises is consistent with his authority. If he chooses to exercise his power based upon someone else's power, the power he exercises none at all as well. So when that officer takes this document without having a proper charge unit in place and goes and performs the arrest, now he is part of the criminal conspiracy. And we now have the crime of kidnapping that has occurred because they did not have lawful authority to be able to perform the arrest. And now they are holding him over for bail, which makes the offense actually a federal offense under Title 18, 1201, because when you kidnap someone and hold them over for ransom in the form of bail, that is kidnapping in the federal crime. And whenever you have a deprivation of rights under code law that occurs in conjunction with a kidnapping, the punishment as prescribed by law is death. It's not coming from me, it's coming from the law. So we have very, very serious offenses that are being committed all across the country by hundreds of thousands of judges, prosecutors, and law enforcement every single day. And we need to make sure that they understand that when you act outside of the law, willfully or negligently, it doesn't matter. Because as a public official, you've already promised to fulfill an outcome, and when you fail to fulfill that promise, you've already implicitly invited punishment in the form of perjury should you fail to fulfill it. So it doesn't matter whether you intended to do it, it doesn't matter whether you knew that you did it. Your willfulness and your knowledge derives from your promise. Therefore, it is a per se offense. So when you make a promise to do to produce a certain outcome, and you fail to fulfill that promise, you're guilty automatically, because I don't have to prove that you intended to breach your obligation. You already promised to do it. So your willfulness and your knowledge derives from the promise that you made. Now it is per se, which meaning that all elements of crime have been met the moment that I have a document that says to be charged by information, not by indictment.
Okay, so then what do you hope the end result of all this is going to be? Because trust me, I'm on your side.
Yeah, I know. So the way I like to describe is this: is that the issue of criminality, right? The way that we're trying to deal with it here in America, it's never going to work, right? We have had an 800% increase in the prison population in the last 30 years, mass incarceration. We have 16 times more prisoners than the next closest industrialized nation. We have 5% of the world's human population, but 26% of the world's prison population. Why is America so bad? Because we've got criminals leading us. So we cannot deal with the criminality of the people, because if our country is being led by criminals, and I'm going to call them criminals. I know that a lot of people say, oh, they acted in error, they made mistakes. No. If you break the law, you transgress the law, that you're a criminal, and I'm going to call you a criminal until you return to the established rule of law. Okay? I want to be clear on that one. So I'm going to continue to call them what they are. But if our country is being led by criminals, people are acting outside of the agreed upon code of conduct established by the majority, the laws that create their office and grant them their authority, then that makes them criminals. And that means that they're going to lead us toward criminality, which will produce an environment of criminality, and that will produce a society of criminals. You see, if my wife and I create an abusive environment, we will produce abusive children, because our children are simply a product of their environment. And a man is no different. A man is simply a product of his environment. So if I am being led by people that are committing extortion every single day, by robbing the Social Security accounts and then funneling that money off to Ukraine, for instance, if they're committing investment every single day, then you can expect that I will be led in the same direction, because I'm following my lead. So we can't just deal with the criminality of people, because we have to first ensure that our leaders are leading our country in the direction we want to go. And so what I want to do more than anything else is that I want us as the people of the United States to understand that what we believe in is not real. If you believe that innocence doesn't suffer here in America, I'm gonna tell you right now, you are a fool. If you believe that you get a fair process here in America because we have the best criminal justice system in the world, I'm gonna tell you right now, you are a fool. Okay? You see, these things, these principles that we have, these American principles, these beliefs that we have, they're wonderful. They're amazing. I used to have them. I had them for half of my life, and I believed in them. But there's a difference between application and theory. The application is off. And we need to recognize that the application is off. Because if what we call good is out killing people with absolute impunity, it cannot be good. Because only evil is able to produce such an act. Good is incapable of doing it. So of the 1,500 people that our nation's put to death since the late 70s, 139 of them have been proven to have been innocent after they were murdered. That's not good. Another 186 have been exonerated after being placed on a death row. That's not good. Those two numbers alone illustrate the fact that 18% of the people that we sent to death here in America were factually innocent. That's not good. It's not good. So we need to understand that if we're not following the procedures and processes, then don't blame the system when innocent suffers, right? So the criminal procedure manual, it was written by a Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals judge, right? So a federal circuit court judge, federal appellate judge. And if you go to the preface, right, and you scroll down to paragraph number 4, what the author said is he said that most prosecutors across the United States agree that as much as 15% of the people in prison are innocent, but that's an acceptable deviance because our system isn't perfect. So what I have to say to you, public officials, and everyone else that says that we have an imperfect system, before you blame the system for your laziness or your incompetence, I would challenge you to first use the system the way that it was designed to be used. Don't blame it because you guys want to have something to blame because you guys have failed the people of the United States because you're not following the rules. So don't blame the law until you attempt to use the law the way it was designed. You see, the grand jury, the purpose of the grand jury is to protect the innocent from hasty and malicious charges. So if you're going to say that it's acceptable for 15% of the people in prison to be innocent, but yet you're going to remove the one countermeasure that exists to prevent innocence from suffering, well, guys, you got your head so far, we're not even talking where it's at. But I'm going to say that you're not following the rules. And so don't blame the system for what's being produced because you guys, those public officials, they should be ashamed of themselves. Because look at how much money they have made off the people of the United States and their unlawful acts, right? The unlawful institutions they put into place, the enslavement of the people of the United States. And then on top of that, the wealth that they built, the institution they built, and they've done it all illegally because they're not following the law. And then they have the audacity to make us also stand up and call them honored. They need to be pretty ashamed of themselves right now because what they've constructed is not at all what was designed, and it is all illegal. All of it. It's all illegal.
Yeah, but you know as well as I do is the system was set up and we've been educated to accept what it is that we have in front of us as being the law of the land.
And that's fine, except for the fact that people are starting to understand. So, you know, when I started this, one of the things I had to say was to the state of Washington, what do you mean people don't get indicted by grand jury? It's right there in the Constitution. And they said, well, because we don't do that, right? And they pointed to a judgment ruling from 1884, Hurtado versus California. They said, yeah, Hurtado versus California, the Supreme Court said we don't have to give you a grand jury. But the Constitution says you do. And I couldn't wrap my head around that. Having a master's degree from a tier 1 university, George Washington University, I studied nothing but the Constitution, my entire master's program. I could not wrap my head around the thought of how is it that you don't have it, but it's right there. It's never changed, never been removed. How is it? Because the judge said so? Well, what gives the judge the authority to say so? I could not understand how this works. So what you gotta understand here is that Justice Gorsuch of the United States Supreme Court, back in November, like right around November 11th, he issued a judicial notice through the SEC versus United States case. And in this judicial notice, right, I believe his dissent was what he wrote, but he talked about a couple of things. One thing that he said that most of the people that are imprisoned here in America are there illegally and unconstitutionally because the courts are choosing to proceed under administrative law and not common law. He went on to say that most of the children that are being taken away from these families is being done illegally and unconstitutionally because the courts are choosing to proceed under administrative law and not common law. And then he added a third element, and he said that the property is being removed from the people of the United States is being done illegally and unconstitutionally because the courts are proceeding under administrative law and not common law. Well, to understand what he was talking about, you have to look at three branches of government. It's essentially you look at three branches of government. So the legislative branch, the first branch, Clause 1, Article 1, says all legislative power is vested in Congress of the United States. So all power to create law is vested in Congress of the United States. All power. No other branch can create law because all law must be made by the legislative branch. Now, the second branch is the executive branch. They are there to enforce the laws as created by the people of the United States through the legislative branch. They don't have the authority to create law, but they're there to enforce it. Now, the third branch is the judicial branch, and they are known as the administrative branch because they're there to administer the laws. So when the administrative branch creates law in the form of a judge-made ruling, right, and they tell people that it's law, even though they have no authority to create law, it's a lie. But yet here we are today with that court in every single state relying upon a judge-made ruling and calling it law and saying, okay, you don't get these things because this judge said that you don't get it. You see, judges swear an oath when they enter into the office with and to the Constitution of the United States. That's the object of which their fidelity is bound. They are to go to it to determine whether or not my rights have been violated. But when I bring a challenge forward today and I say that this has been deprived of me, then they don't go to the Constitution to determine whether or not my rights have been violated. Instead, they go to a judge-made ruling to make a determination as to whether or not my rights are violated, which is administrative law. So when the judicial what's that? When the judicial branch, go ahead.
No, I haven't said nothing. Go ahead.
Oh, I keep on hearing something in back. So when the judicial branch creates law, when they don't have the constituted authority to do so, then remember Norton versus Shelby County. Any law that is not law or any unconstitutional law is unconstitutional on its face, as though it never even existed. It is inoperable, and it's not unconstitutional from the moment it's deemed such, but from the moment it's created, it creates no office, no obligations, no one ruling. Right? And then they say that it's law. So we have the low. Okay. So when you have the judicial branch that chooses to create something and call it law when it has no constitutional authority to do so, then they rely upon it as the foundation for future decisions. Then what happens is we get into a situation known as legal. We get into a situation known as legal realism. And you guys, I'm really sorry. We're going through a little section here that we might lose some data. Hopefully we'll be in Oklahoma City here very, very shortly. We won't lose too much. But when the judges make the foundation, the flawed decision of the man that came before them, or the flawed decision of the man that came before him, instead of the object to which fidelity is bound, then it's not constitutional, guys. They can either go to the Constitution and follow it, or they can choose to go to something that's not the Constitution, that's unconstitutional, and they will produce an unconstitutional outcome. Because when you rely upon something that is unconstitutional to determine the direction you're going to go, of course, that must produce an unconstitutional outcome. So we have an unbelievable number of judgments that are placed with people that believe that they owe a debt to society, that is binding them in chains and keeping them in a state of oppression simply because the system loves to profit off of their involuntary servitude, and we're not going to do that anymore. I think we need to help our brothers and sisters. We need to raise them up. We need to remove the chains that bind them, and we certainly have to remove them if they were placed onto them illegally in violation of the very laws that we all believe in every single day. We look up to for our lives and sustenance. So we, as the people of the United States, we need to decide what it is that we believe in. Do we believe in the Constitution? And if we do, then the answer is that we know what the outcome must be. Because if we follow it, we know what we're going to have to do. And so, even these judges, I don't believe that they're bad people. Right? I don't believe that anybody enters in that position with the intent that they're going to destroy our nation and harm our people. But just as the philosopher Nietzsche said, those who fight monsters should see to it in the process they don't become a monster. And today, you guys, justice is a monster. They're the monster. And we need to realize that and accept it for what it is, because if we want to fix it and put it heading down a good path, then that's going to start with good leadership. And so those leaders, as I draw the line in the sand, as I go around the country delivering these criminal affidavits on behalf of the people of the United States, serving them on the attorney generals in these states, they might laugh at me. They might say, yeah, you're not getting much traction. He doesn't have the news there, and he doesn't have crowds, but this is a lawful service. And when we provide this service, we're giving them an opportunity to decide what they want to be. Because if you want to be honorable, just as Justice Hugo Black said in 1960, honorable men honor the law. If you're not going to honor the law, then you have no place in the leadership of our country. You have certainly no right to title of ownership, and we're going to make sure that you guys are held accountable for the crimes that you committed against the people of the United States, robbing them of the freedoms, treasures, and everything we hold in value, because it's not right. It's not right what they've done, and it's not right how they led us astray in their own desire to liberate this institution.
Well, I've been going down this road for about the last 10 years here in the state of Missouri.
Yeah.
I mean, it's to the point where just about every single law that's passed is unconstitutional. And generally what you end up hearing is you'll tell somebody, or you go, hey, you can't take this to the floor because it's unconstitutional. The response normally is, well, that's up to a judge to determine.
No.
And my response is always, no, that's up to you to determine, because you swore that oath to specifically follow the Constitution as it is written, not what it is that a judge has opined in some ruling that literally had nothing to do with what it is that you're talking about anyway.
Right. That's why a self-evident crime, a per se crime, which is a crime that a public official commits. At any time you have a public official that breaches their obligation, fails to fulfill the promise, they have committed what's known as a per se crime. Now, per se crimes are self-evident. That's the definition of per se, is self-evident, which is an interesting word considering that the Declaration of Independence said that we hold these truths to be self-evident, right? So when a public official fails to fulfill a promise, then their crime does not require a finding of facts. You don't have to have a jury come together to determine whether or not they actually committed a crime, because all elements of the crime have been met the moment that they breach the obligation. Whether they do it intentionally or negligently, it doesn't matter. If they breach an obligation, they commit a crime, right? That's why the laws of conspiracy are the way they are. But you don't have to show knowledge. You don't have to show intent, because their knowledge and intent derives from the promise that they made, the oath. So anytime you have a public official and you implicate them into a criminal conspiracy by bringing it to their attention, that's why the laws of criminal conspiracy says any person who, having knowledge of any of the wrongs conspired to be done, and who have the power to prevent or aid in the prevention of the commission of same, neglects or refuses to do so, may be joined as defendants in the action. Once you notify them, as of that moment, there's only two ways to mitigate your culpability in that criminal conspiracy, to eliminate yourself and withdraw from it. Those two ways are: one, you notify the authorities of the crime, or two, you notify your co-conspirators of your intent to no longer participate in the criminal conspiracy, but that must be done by some affirmative action. You must see their action. If they can't show you that they took affirmative action, then they took no action at all. And so just because you pretend like you don't know it, just because you ignore it, does not make it real. Because when I serve you, Attorney General, with these criminal affidavits, and remember, guys, I have the authority to do this. I have an honorable discharge from the United States military. I swore an oath on November 19th, 1996, that I will support the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And when I'm discharged after 8 years in the military with an RER1 discharge, meaning that I am fully reinstatable, they can recall me back at any moment, then I have an oath that is binding, perpetual, and self-executing. It is for my life. And when I encounter someone that is warring against the Constitution, I have an obligation to stand up and enforce the laws of the United States of America. And I have the authority to do so because I have the oath. That oath is the only thing that gives them their power But they swore an oath to the state. I swear an oath to the United States. I'm here to protect it. And if they're not going to follow or enforce the laws of the United States, then I'm going to bring the charges to them. I'm going to bring it to them, because I don't believe in the United States of Texas, or I don't believe in the United States of California. I believe in the United States of America, and that's what I fight for. So when Texas or Oklahoma or Washington tells me that they're not going to follow the one thing that binds America together, I'm going to say to you, you're a traitor, and you just violate your oath. And the moment you do that, there's a whole bunch of crimes that exist. And so I have the authority to bring these forward. I have the authority to act as a custodian. This is evidence of a real crime that has been committed against a real person. I collected this. I met with them here. I got their signature. And now I'm bringing this evidence in from one custodian to another custodian. And I'm going to hand this to them, just like I've done in 17 other states. And I'm going to say, what do you guys want to do about this? Because you could choose to do something. And I would say, just make the right decision, because if you don't do something, it still is. They have no idea what I have planned next. You know, this is just a step in the whole process. We've got the writs in its springs. He's admitted it. Case law is not the foundation. Case law is not law. And yet we have all these people that are in prison today on something that isn't even law, through a direct, willful defiance of the laws established by the people and put into place by these states. So, you know, when we have Guantanamo Bay and Camp X-Ray, and we have a bunch of terrorist suspects that are sent down there, and in 2004, we have a Supreme Court that comes out and says that they are all protected by every single right, every single privilege, every single immunity that's contained in the Constitution. Those terrorist suspects are guaranteed that. That was in 2004, you guys. Every single right contained in the Constitution is protected against those terrorist suspects, but not United States citizens residing within the states if the states decide that they don't want to give them to you. Where's the disconnect there? How is it that in 2004 we guarantee the right to a grand jury to every single terrorist suspect in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, but here in America we can have 700,000 of our own people within our own nation who are not protected by it, simply because the states are too lazy to follow the rules? I'm raising the bullshit flag on that, you guys. I'm raising the bullshit flag.
I think your 700,000 figure is way low. It's got to be in the millions.
It is, but this is the direct facial constitutional violation, because we haven't even gotten to the second half. The second half is that 99% of all criminal defendants do not get to be present in that grand jury. And what we got to understand is that, first off, the grand jury is a proceeding that's there to protect the defendant, not the accuser. It's there to protect the accused. And when you prevent the accused from being present in the very proceeding that is designed and intended to protect him and his rights, come on. It's wrong. It's unlawful. It's illegal. Because when government chooses to take a side, because if I call up the police and I say something happened to me, right? The police then come, and then the government becomes I'm their client. That prosecutor is my attorney, right? So when my attorney, as the accuser, when my attorney chooses to permit me to present my accusation, right, to the grand jury, but then hinder or obstruct free speech and or control the narrative by preventing the other party from presenting their evidence, guess what? That's a violation of the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause. Doesn't get much more simple than that. Government cannot hinder or obstruct free speech in order to control the narrative, nor can they treat two people in like circumstances unequally. So we have 99% of the people that are imprisoned, that have ever been imprisoned, that are there, and those are unlawful judgments, because you cannot say that the very proceeding that is intended to protect the innocent and give them an opportunity to confront the accusations against them, and you're going to prevent them from being present because you want your client to tell his story, but you don't want the opposing party to be able to confront that story. We got some problems, guys, and we're going to get those. We're going to get this addressed, because these are the criminal acts that they're committing, because they have a desire to create this industry and to force our brothers and sisters into involuntary servitude in for-profit industries for the direct benefit of the state. And then we want to walk around and we want to talk about how we're all free and blah, blah. No, man. We have 140,000 prisoners in prison down in Florida that don't get paid 1 cent for any of the work that they do, and yet they're building the chipset for General Dynamics fighter jets. They're answering the help desk phones for Lockheed Martin. This is a disgusting institution, right? And we cannot permit this anymore. America doesn't believe in slavery, and yet we have taken this institution that we say we don't want, that we had 1 million of our brothers and sisters die in a war fighting against. And then what do? We let lawmakers create a law that says slavery doesn't exist anymore. We abolish it, guys. It's all gone. Look the other way. 13th Amendment didn't abolish slavery. Not only does it permit it, but it codified the legality of it within our foundational law. The very law that ensures and guarantees everyone's freedom says you can slave. Because what the 13th Amendment says, it says neither slavery nor involuntary servitude shall exist except as punishment for crime. The moment you say except, you guys, the truth is that the moment you say except, it means you can't have slavery. But we got to call it justice here in America from now on. And now we know what the mass incarceration is. Now we know why we've had an 800% increase in prison population. Now we know why we have 16 times more prisoners than the next closest industrialization. It's because we have slavery prolific, spread all across the country, in every single jurisdiction, every single state, and yet the slave owner itself is the one that creates the laws. It's the one that accuses of the crime. It's the one that investigates the crime, and it's the one that judges the crime, and the one that benefits directly off the involuntary labor of those that they choose to wrap up in their system by labeling a criminal. This is the truth that we need to understand. This is what I want people to understand, because without knowledge of this, then we will walk around saying, we've got the best criminal justice system in the world. It's perfect. It's the best. Innocence doesn't suffer here in America. Everybody in prison deserves to be there. Bullshit.
How do you educate a general public that A, does not understand their authority as part of the grand jury, and B, do not understand what their position on a jury is in front of a criminal defendant?
Well, I mean, all that I can say is that we are where we're at today, not because of anyone's individual issues. We're here because of ignorance that's progressively gotten us to this place. But to permit ignorance is to empower it. So I personally, when I realized what was going on, when I realized what I was doing personally and how I was doing it contrary to law, I myself had to make a decision. Do I correct it? Do I change my behavior? Do I start acting lawful, or do I pretend like I didn't see it and just continue on with status quo and accept its mediocrity? And that's not the way they'll go. It's not the way I can go. I can't do that. So I can't answer that question. But what I can say is that if the American people, if we want to have a sustainable future, right? If we want to be able to eliminate this chaos that we see in the world today, if we want to set ourselves free from the chains that bind us, if we want to set our grandchildren, our children free, and we want to eliminate the injustice that is everywhere, prolific across the country, in mass scale, if we want to do that, then we need to start by making a decision on the issue. Are we going to follow the law or not? Today we're not, and that's produced a wrong outcome. So when we choose to make the wrong decision at the inception of the issue, we can assume that we will have a wrong outcome. Now, the same can be said on the other side, because right now everybody's saying, oh yeah, look at what will happen if he wins. Look at all those prisoners that'll get out. Look at all those children that'll go back to those abusive homes. Look at what will happen in the end if he gets his way. And I got to stop y'all and say, don't look at the end. You got to look at the issue, because wrong will always produce wrong, right will always produce right. So if we look at the issue, we say, you know what, we're going to follow the laws from now on. We're going to do the right decision. We're going to obey them and not act in violation. We're going to choose to go consistent with what the law demands. Then we can assume that whatever the outcome is going to be right, because right will always produce right. So I can't answer the question on how to educate the public, because all that I can do is live out my faith. God has given me faith. I have that faith. My faith right now is that I have a task, and that's to educate the people as much as I can, to bring this awareness to them. But I have to live it and I have to act it. and that means that I'm not gonna let someone else do this. That this has to be done. We have to serve these attorney generals. We have to draw this line in the sand. It doesn't matter how dangerous it is. It doesn't matter how much it costs me. It doesn't matter if I have to walk to do it. It has to be done because we have to do this quickly and decisively. And we need to draw that line of sand with each one of these states quickly and say, this is what you're doing, and it's illegal and unconstitutional. And we're in the middle of an election cycle right now. The people are going to catch on to this. This is going to catch. People are going to start to hear about it. And when that happens, public officials, what am I going to say when they ask me, have I informed you? Right? When the news comes to me and says, well, what did you do? Well, I notified every single United States senator. I notified every single attorney general. I notified the Supreme Court. I notified every single judge within the entire circuit and district. I notified these public officials, and yet they did nothing about it. Do you think that you're going to get reelected when the people of the United States come to understand that you had an opportunity to correct unconstitutional acts, to correct the unlawful acts that are being committed against innocent people within your own state, your own constituents, and you're just going to ignore it? I don't think that that's going to bode too well. Likewise, when I do get to the Supreme Court in June, and I demand and invoke Article 3 and tell them you have an obligation to hear this. I'm not asking you, I'm telling you because you're my servant, and I'm gonna invoke my right to Article 3 and tell you that you have an obligation to hear my case. And when I do that, right, I mean, I'm not gonna give them the convenience of being able to use excuses, and we need to make sure that they're notified. We need to make sure that the line is drawn in sand. And when we do place it in the hands of the Supreme Court, those nine justices are not going to tell the American people, 330 million people, that what they believe in is not real. They're not going to say, we will not follow the Constitution, we won't obey it, and you guys fend for yourselves. They won't do that because they love the power that they have. They love the institution that they built. If they make such a decision, they don't have a job anymore. They don't have an institution. That court is not what it says it is. So to preserve their own institution and to preserve their own power, they will make a decision that's consistent with what's in the best interest of that power. So, I've had dinner with some governors. I've had dinner with some attorney generals. I've had dinner with senators. Every single one of them say that I'm right. They say I'm right. And most of them said that they support me, that they agree with me privately, but they will not do it publicly. And that's frustrating to me because that leaves me, in the situation I'm in where, I have to continue to push forward without, the support that I need, on a day-to-day, step-by-step basis. But that's my faith. That's what God gives me. I have to continue to live that out. But what that does tell me is it tells me that the hardest part is going to be the journey, right? Getting there is going to be the hardest part. But once I get there, it's not going to be a fight because they all believe in it anyway. So I'm not worried about the fight. I'm worried about getting there. The destination is what matters. The journey is immaterial. So if they don't want to help me get there because they're afraid of coming and supporting me and what might their constituents think, well, what they don't understand is what are your constituents going to think when I do get there, right? And I do tell them that you had an opportunity to do something about this and you said, I'm not going to support you privately, even though I believe in what you're doing.
So what is your hope once you get to Washington, D.C.?
We will be heard. The Supreme Court will agree to hear the case. And when they do, we're going to have a pretty significant shift in the structure of government that we have. Because I think that those men are honorable. Those men and women are honorable. I do. And even if they are acting unlawfully, I do believe, because it happened to me when I was convicted, I was shown that what I was doing was unlawful. My heart told me that I needed to do the right thing, right? And I'm a nobody, right? I mean, I was an architect within a number of national security programs, but I'm not a senator or Supreme Court justice or the president. I'm not those people. But they come from the same blood that I come from. And I was representing the same institutions that they represent. And I thought that I was doing the right thing for years. I thought that those things that I was doing were good. I knew at the time that they were wrong, but it never occurred to me that they could hurt someone, because that's just what I was taught. And so what we're dealing with is cognitive dissonance. Now, cognitive dissonance is when your actions and your morals, they don't align. So you might believe that you're honorable, right? You might believe that you're a good, honorable leader, right? And that you're doing good things for a country. But if your actions are contrary to it, then the only thing we're going to remember are your actions. And if your actions are criminal, then you will never be remembered as honorable. So when you deal with cognitive dissonance, what happens is that they start justifying their behavior because they don't want to feel discomfort of knowing that their actions are criminal, but they believe that they're honorable. So they say, oh, well, if you don't do this way, then we won't be able to adjudicate all the crimes. Or if we don't do it this way, then look at all the people that will get away. If we don't do it this way, look at all the children that will remain in an abusive home. So they justify their actions in order to not feel discomfort from it. So when you deal with this issue, cognitive dissonance, the way that you deal with it is with the truth, right? I'm going to tell you the truth. You, judge, are a criminal. You're a criminal. You're not honorable because you're not honoring the law. And if you're not honoring the law, you're a criminal. Look at your actions. I'm going to show you exactly how lawful you are. And if you're a criminal, you're not going to sit up there. If you're a criminal, right, and you continue committing crime despite being made aware, then that's a whole different ballgame. That's not a mistake. That's not an error. That is a crime punishable by death. It's treason. So if I can change so dramatically and so instantaneously, then I do believe that by the words that I'm speaking, by the truth that I'm telling, I do believe that in the next 3 weeks, I can influence the actions and decisions, the future actions and decisions of those 9 men and women. Because as I continue to get out here, and I continue to push up to them and us, right? We want to ignore them because we don't want to bring attention to them. But what do we do? And as that attention continues to flow up there, then, my intent is that maybe they'll do a little bit of investigation on me. Maybe they'll go out and actually listen to some of the things I say, listen to some of my podcasts, my interviews, the things I've written. I hope so. I hope that they do. Because what they're going to find is that I'm not trying to destroy anything. I'm trying to save us. Right? I'm trying to give us a sustainable future by giving us something that we can actually look up to every single day for our lives and sustenance and believe in it because the systems adhere to it. I'm trying to return us the foundation that we lost in our own ignorance because we permitted a government to step in and continue to enslave people despite the fact that we said that everyone's free. So that's not what the system is.
Would you recommend individual people start doing this on the state level?
Yeah.
And if so, how do they go about doing it?
So the thing is that every single public official is currently engaged in a criminal conspiracy. There's no denying it. Undermining the laws of the United States of America, that's what they're doing. Because they're choosing to rely upon state statutes that remove freedom, right? When you have a child, right? When you have a child, that relationship with that child, your right to be a parent and that child's right to be a child is protected by the First Amendment of the United States Constitution. So when a state creates a law that says that they are able to remove that child from the love and care of their parents, that's an unconstitutional law, you guys. And when the state chooses to rely upon that to deprive a person of something that's guaranteed by the Constitution of the United States of America, once again, deprivation of rights under color of law. We have 12 million children across America today that are being removed from the love of their mothers and fathers, and they're taken in to these institutions, and we're doing it in order to make money, right? $70,000 per child that they remove from the love and care of their family, the state makes. Some states are making $400,000, right? So we've got a monetary incentive to harm these children, right? To create trauma and inflict it upon them simply because of the economic value that these children generate. But what we need to understand is that with every single child that we remove from the love and care of their fathers and mothers, that child now has an 80% likelihood of going to prison themselves because they don't know how to be a man, or they don't know how to be a woman, or they don't know how to develop relationships. So we want to talk about the institution. We want to point at them and say, look at what those monsters are doing, without failing to understand where those monsters came from. They came from the system that is acting unlawfully and is hurting the people and destroying our union. And so, people have asked me numerous times, they've said to me, like, look at everything you had to give up, or look at what I have to give up if I were to get involved in this. I don't want to get involved because it'll cost me too much. And I have to say to you guys, across every single state, is if you want to talk about what it would cost you if you get involved, I want you to take a look at what it's going to cost you if you do not get involved. Because there's going to come a point in time when that money is going to be of no value because we don't have a nation anymore. There's going to come a point in time when your property is not going to be yours to own anymore. There's going to come a point in time when you're going to have to say that if I don't get involved, look at what it's going to cost me. In our country, we're at that point, you guys. I do not think that we're going to make it through another 4 years. It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter who's put in. If we don't come together in unity to fix this dissolution, this conflict that we are creating in our own ignorance, if we don't do something about it, there will not be a country in 4 years. And it'll be our own fault. We will have no one to blame but ourselves. So for me, I'm not doing this because I want them to be held accountable. I'm not doing this because I want to see these judges in prison. I'm doing this because they have a duty and responsibility to care for the people below them. And we want to exit because we got to go to the Capitol and downtown. Yeah. So as we inform them of what they're doing, right? We point to their crimes and we say to them, I'm not trying to send you to prison. I'm just trying to get you to do the right thing, right? Protect the people, because that's what the law was created for. Yeah. That was what the law was created for. The constitutional law was there to restrain the government and to protect the people. So when government decides that they're going to use the very object that was designed to protect them as a weapon against them, well, our government needs to be put on notice, and they need to understand that when you choose to violate, or when you choose to abuse the powers that you're given in order to offend the very object that affords. So when the Constitution of the United States gives you your authority so that you can use that authority to protect the people, and then you choose to abuse your powers to harm the people, don't think that law is going to protect you. Don't think you're going to be immune, because there is no immunity from criminal liability, right? You guys are well mistaken. Absolute immunity covers your civil liability. I cannot sue you because I sue your master, but I sure the hell can hold you accountable for every single criminal act that you commit against a person such as myself through your abuse of delegated authority. And those crimes come with can threaten me with. So, I want these public, and you're going to destroy lives, and you're going to harm the people, and you're going to lead our country toward dissolution because you want to make money and trade on New York Stock Exchange. Then I'm going to call you out on it. I'm going to make sure that every single person knows exactly what you are. So that's what you guys need to be doing at state level. These people need to understand this isn't a mistake. This isn't an error. The laws create the obligation. And if you fail to fulfill the obligation, willfully or negligently, you're a criminal. They're crimes. So don't call them honorable. Don't tell them that they made a mistake. Don't permit them a way out. If they're a duck and they walk like a duck and talk like a duck, call them what they are. They're a duck, right? They are. So don't permit them to say to you that they made errors, because abuse of delegated authority, breach of statutory obligation is a crime. It's a crime. You don't sue them because they have immunity. You hold them criminally liable. You hold the agent criminally liable, and then you have grounds to sue the master civilly. So if you want to know why you guys don't get action on your 1983s, right? Why you're not getting action on these deprivation rights under color of law, civil rights suits that you keep on bringing, is because before you can claim that you haven't had a right violated, you first must show that one of these agents had a duty to act and they breached the duty. Because until you hold an agent criminally liable under the enforcement statutes of the Civil Rights Act, you have no grounds for 1983 deprivation of rights under Colored Law Civil Rights Act. There's certain steps that have to be followed. I'm bringing this down the first step. We got to first hold the agents accountable for the crimes they commit, because they're not immune from criminal liability. And then once we do, I will be able to provide the support and empowerment that the people you guys need to be able to start winning the cases out here at the edge, so you can be made whole, your family can be made whole. But you understand, you have no grounds for civil remedy. You have no grounds for a civil case until you first show that someone had a duty and they breached that duty. Someone broke the law. So when you go to the Judicial Misconduct Board and you say judge made misconduct, misconduct's not a crime. Or when you say that there was an error that was made, right, in the ruling, when error is not a crime, right? Deprivation of rights under Colored Law is a crime. So call it out for what it is. Don't give them any way out. And you know what? Start winning your cases, because no public official has immunity from criminal liability. No one is allowed to break the law. If you say that you can use discretion to with regard to an obligation, then you are using your discretion abusively to break the law, because the obligation is the law. So that's why you can never, ever, ever use discretion with regard to one's obligations. Can't do it. Can't do it.
Your mic's not on, Vince.
If I may interject real quick, Tom, you really asked an excellent question.
Yeah, okay.
That question being, how do we go about this? I am in touch right now with some people in Canada, and they've got a Democratic advocacy group. And I believe if Tanawah's first step goes in the direction that he hopes it to go, I think the next step, of course, would be to have some kind of an advocacy group that's recognized throughout the U.S., that people are, in fact, from state to state, someone that steps in and works with. And really, it's got to be bigger than that, I think, because I do believe, Tom, you and I have talked about the jury system. It may not be so bad to have an advocate as such in the courtrooms to see to it that the laws are followed the way they should be properly.
So Vincent, we have to understand the rules in the courtroom. We have to get that addressed first and foremost. So the history of a judge is a judge's purpose was to be the guarantors of liberty, right? They were to guarantee freedom. So the role of the judge was to protect the minority from the majority. So the purpose of the judge was to protect the defendant and to ensure that the defendant gets the protections that are granted to them from the majority that's trying to remove it from them, right? The purpose of the judge was to protect that defendant, not work against that defendant. His sole purpose was to ensure that criminal defendant was not abused by the majority, right? That's what an honorable man does, right? That's what an honorable man, but that's not what they're doing at all. Now, an advocate, interestingly, traditionally is known as a prosecutor. A prosecutor is an advocate, because the role of a prosecutor was to advocate on behalf of the defendant. Once again, their role was to protect the defendant and to ensure that a fair and neutral, guys, right now, and I've been telling you this for months now, when a prosecuting attorney has a degree in Juris Doctorate, in adjective law, they have a degree in making that person into a criminal. That's all that they see. That's all they know how to do. That's all the laws that they've learned. All that a Juris Doctorate can do is make you into a criminal. So when you come to a Juris Doctorate, you say, I didn't commit this crime. They cannot see you as innocent, because all that they can see you as is guilty. The expertise, the understanding of law, the application of law that we have in place in the courtroom today is off. My degree is a degree that prosecutors should have. They need to have my degree. They need to have a degree in substantive law, because if they're the highest law enforcement officer in the country, then they have to be able to know, for instance, what is the criminal deterrent? What is mens rea? Was a crime even committed, right? What is corpus delicti? These are things that they have to know. But I can come into this from a neutral, unbiased, fair perspective, because I'm not looking to make anybody a criminal, but I'm looking at determining the truth and ascertain and obtaining justice. That's what I have, because I'm an investigator. I have a master's in forensics. I have a master's in substantive law. I have a master's in law enforcement. And this is the role that the prosecutors should have, because if someone comes to me and says to me that this person did it, I can't immediately say, oh, this guy's guilty. He's guilty as hell, because my client said he did it. And I don't care what he says. I'm just going to arrest him, throw him into jail. I'm going to threaten him, intimidate him, take away all his rights, threaten him with 30 years in prison if he doesn't plead guilty. And guess what? I'm right, and I win, right? I mean, no, you guys, you're wrong. And everything you're doing is wrong, because you guys don't even understand the law. And you certainly don't understand criminality. That's what I understand. And that's why you're losing, right? That's why these judges are, because we cannot continue to believe that we can go to criminals and expect criminals to lead us in a lawful direction. That's why I say to everybody right now that if you want to go a different direction, if you're not happy with the direction that we're going, then we need to start doing the opposite. So when they tell us to go to the lowest court, we need to go to the highest court. When they tell us to use case law and the lowest law, let's use constitutional law. When they tell us to appeal a judgment, say, no, there's nothing to appeal, it's void. I'm going to habeas corpus it, right? When they say follow a lawyer, follow a criminal, I'm going to say, you guys, follow an advocate. I can lead us in a lawful direction, because I know the laws that set free. That's all I studied. That's all I know, and that's all I'll argue from. I'm not going to let them drag me down off of the highest form of law to argue down the weeds in something that isn't even law. No, I'm going to draw them up to me. I'm going to tell them come up to my level, argue at my level with my law, and when you do, you're going to lose every time. So we can all have the same power when we grasp and wrap our heads around the knowledge that anything that is not the Constitution is unconstitutional. Simply by virtue of the fact that it is not the Constitution, that makes it unconstitutional. So when you choose to argue something that's not the Constitution, you guys are going to lose, because it's unconstitutional. So if you want to win an argument, if you want to win a legal debate, there's one law to follow. It's only 4 pages. Argue it. Do not step down off of it. Do not bring in statutes, ordinances, customs, judgment. None of that matters, because the only thing that matters is the words that's written and that are self-evident, written in that truth, Constitution of the United States. And when you argue at that level, they're going to run, and you're going to win, because they cannot fight that level. When they choose to say that this judge from 1884 said that I don't get it, I'm going to say again, no person shall be held to answer for capital or otherwise they prescribed unless on presentment or indictment of a grand jury. You want to tell me once again that a judge said I don't get it? Awesome. No person shall be held to answer for capital or otherwise they prescribed unless on presentment or indictment of a grand jury. It doesn't change, you guys, until an authentic act of the people changes it. It is binding wholly on everybody, collectively and individually.
Didn't Marbury v. Madison opinion specifically state that unconstitutional laws are null and void?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so when you create a law and you call it case law, because it's a judge-made rulings. Judges create rulings, they don't create law. But when you take your rulings and you call it law, it's a lie, because the judges can't create law. They can't create law. So the whole thing, everything we've constructed, the foundation all the way up, is built upon a lie. Built upon something that's not law. It wasn't created by the people. It's fully without force or effect. It has no validity. And it's time for us to accept the fact that we have an opportunity here in a couple of weeks when I get back to DC, because we built a courthouse upon the reclaimed sand in a swamp, and then we expect it to stand when it was built on a wrong foundation, man. It should have been built upon the bedrock of the nation, and we didn't do it. So I'm telling you, Washington, I'm going to be there in 2 weeks. I am the storm, and that house is coming down with you or without you. I don't care, but we have the power to bring it down. And we're going to expose you for all the lies that you've been telling the people. And the only thing I've asked you for 8 years is you come forward. You tell the people the truth. You tell them what has happened, right? And if you do that, you can get your honor back. But if you don't, then I'm going to help you tell the truth. And I told you that. But if I have to help you tell the truth, if I have to tell it for you, then by the time I'm done with this, you're going to be begging me to stop, because you will not be able to live with the shame that has overcome you from a nation that you almost destroyed in your greed and arrogance. And I told them that 9 years ago. I'm going to live up to that. They can be very afraid of what I'm doing. They may not take me seriously because they might not see me as a formidable opponent out here. But I assure you that you have no idea what I'm capable of.
Apparently, you're at where you need to be.
Yes, sir. We're here at the Capitol in Oklahoma City. We're about to serve the Attorney General here in Oklahoma City, General Drummond. We have 10 criminal affidavits right here. These are friends of mine, every one of them, all my friends. Some of these friends you guys have locked up on offenses that they were absolutely innocent of, simply because you could steal their grandchildren from them. Bill and Lisa Woolley. Mr. Drummond, the storm is here, and we're tired of the bullshit that you're proliferating. We're tired of the lies that you've been spreading, and it's time for you to understand, because I've had this conversation with you. You understand my position. You understand, and you agreed at one point in time that this is right.
Looks like we've lost him for a moment.
Apparently so.
Tanawah, if you can hear me, I'm just going to put you down here, or you can re-enter later. In the meantime, to continue this on, because we still have a good 30, 40 minutes we could use up here. Tom, what is your opinion of what you've just heard?
One of the things that he points out, and I'm not too sure that people grasp the concept of what their rights are, how it is they're being violated, what to do about the violation of rights. Because I've heard it 1,000 times stated, and rightly so, based on our own ignorance and our educational standards, is that when the government creates a law, they have the people wearing uniforms and badges to back up that law, which both you and I are familiar with. When they violate the law, well, then we're supposed to present to the same entity that has the badges and the guns and the uniforms to do what? I mean, there's nothing, unless the people start holding some sort of a tribunal law system, I don't see how this changes.
You know, you made an interesting point just now, Tom. I watched a video the other day. They had protesters across the road blocking an entryway or travel of people that wanted to, I believe, go to like some kind of national park. And they just happened to be in the tribal area of reservations of the Native Americans. And those tribal police literally drove down through the road blockade and almost hurt, could have hurt people and everything else. They didn't care. They were not happy that these protesters were impeding traffic in the middle of the desert getting to their destinations. You don't mess with because the tribal reservation people, they have a totally different, I believe, totally different law, even kind of structure than we do. Similar, but different. You've got to obey their laws when you're on a reservation, more or less.
Yeah, it would be like going over to Russia with a baggie of pot, where it's illegal in Russia to have pot. Whether you agree with the law or not, I don't. But when in Russia you do as the Russians do, or you end up in a Russian jail, just as Brittany Griner.
Yes, and the worst part about that one was the trade-off. We let a guy out that has the connections that are devastating. They're not dangerous. They're not upsetting. They're devastating to countries, to governments, to the small people, what that guy was capable of doing. And like you said, Brittany Griner, she broke the law. simple as that. When in, and you said when in Russia, but when in Rome, you do as the Romans do.
You know, when I was stationed at in South Korea back in the early '80s, they flat out told us when we first got on base, do not violate any laws outside these gates. Did we know what they were? No, we didn't. However, if you have a respect for and an understanding of what rights are, it's incredibly difficult for you to be in violation of any law unless there's laws that are passed that are absolutely in violation of your rights, which 99% of all the rights, all the legal system is nothing but violation of rights under the color of law.
Right. Did you catch that, Tanawah?
Not really. I mean, I heard a little bit of it, but I had this argument out on the next page the other day, and someone was trying to tell me, where laws come from, right? Rights come from. That's not an argument that anybody should really get engaged with me on, because I'm an expert in rights. The doctrine of duties and rights are very, very simple. What we constructed here, once you understand it, it's very, very simple. So according to the doctrine of duties and rights always derive from another's duty to act. Where there is no duty, there cannot be a right, okay? Now, there are duties that exist that have no right, such as duty to God, duty to spouse, duty to country. I don't have any rights that derive from my obligation to serve and my duty to God. But there are no rights that exist without a corresponding duty. And the reason why is because the law establishes the obligations, the duties. So I have an obligation or a duty to not kill someone. I have an obligation not to assault someone. I have an obligation not to steal from someone. If I breach my obligation and I steal from you, right, then your right to not have your property stolen has been violated. But it doesn't exist until someone else breaches their duty to act, right? And that's why I say that when you deal with civil rights in particular, and you want to say that you want to reinforce the deprivation of a right, you have to understand that before you can claim that any right has been violated, you must first show that someone else had a duty, they failed to fulfill that duty, they breached it by breaking the law, and thus now you have a right that exists, but you have no right that exists until then. So a good example is this. The Article 3 of the Constitution says, the trial of all crimes, with the exception of impeachment, shall be by jury, and the trial shall occur in the state on which the crime is said to have been committed. Is that the right to a trial by jury, or is that a duty to provide a trial by jury? It's a duty. It's directing someone to know that the only way that you can adjudicate a crime, with the exception of impeachment, is a jury trial. So if that's the obligation that exists, then me as a judge, if I were to say to you, do you want to give up your right to a trial by jury and enter into this plea of guilt? Before I even have that right to give up, that judge has to breach their obligation of ensuring that the jury trial is provided. So you cannot give up a right. They are inalienable because your right does not exist until they breach their obligation. And so there's a couple ways that you can look at this, right? There's a couple ways that our founders actually made this happen for our benefit. So the main body of the Constitution, Articles 1 through Article 7, that establishes the obligations of government. Nowhere in that do you find a single right. That is all obligations. Articles 1 through 7 establishes the obligations of government. Well, the main body of the Constitution, that was enacted and ratified by the people on September 17th, 1787. And then the Bill of Rights were adopted and ratified by the people on December 15th, 1791. Therefore, the duty comes before the right. The government accepted duty before the rights existed. Therefore, the duty must come before the right. So if you don't understand this basic, simple, basic concept, then you're going to find it very, very difficult to be able to reinforce your rights, to be able to even discuss where your rights come from, or what they are, how they work. You can't understand any of this unless you get past and understand the simple concept of where do your rights come from. They come from someone's duty to act. And when they breach their duty, they violate your right. But until they breach their duty, you have no rights, and you can't give them up, because They made a promise that they will give them to you. So the judges in every state, or sorry, the people of the United States have the right to due process of the law because the judges in every state have the duty to ensure those rights are provided. So when they don't provide the right because they breach their duty, well, it's done. So, and this is even codified within the law and within rulings. Take a look at Miranda versus Arizona, where rights secured by the Constitution are involved. There can be no legislation or rule created which would abrogate them. You can't create a rule, judge-made ruling that will abrogate a constitutional right. Okay. The next one that I would point to is the rules of civil procedure, because it says that rules must not conflict with statutes, nor impair the legal parties of the legal rights of the parties involved. Thus, a court has no power to create a rule which would constitute a waiver of a constitutional right. That's written right in the rules of civil procedure. No court can create a rule which would constitute a waiver of a constitutional right, and yet you sit there in a courtroom. Do you want to waive your right to a jury trial? Do you want to waive your right to remain silent? Do you want to waive your? Are you serious? Do you guys even read your own laws? What's wrong with you? This is no-brainer stuff here.
Well, we have state statutes that have been written that basically make it the case that administrative law is the rule of the state, where they have basically said common law doesn't exist anymore. We have one of them right here in Missouri. I remember it passing about 2 to 3 years ago.
So I was on a phone call yesterday with the state police, right? With the state police we served in Missouri, and had a nice little conversation with this guy. And this is what the people need to understand, because this is how much respect your public officials have for your will and the laws that you created. Is he said, Missouri doesn't have to follow the Constitution. What did you just say? You're in charge of the police, the state police here, and you're saying to me that you don't have to follow the Constitution? Are you fucking insane? Are you just out of your fucking mind? What is wrong with you? I mean, I can't even comprehend such level of stupid.
And he said that to me in a conversation. And when I told that to Tanawah, and I gave him Brandon Parker badge number 1134, when I gave him his information and the phone number, I was thinking, yeah, the guy can't repeat it. He's not going to say it. Well, he did. A phone call later on. What did you say it was? Yesterday evening it was, Tanawah, or this morning?
When I talked to him? Yeah. I talked to him this afternoon sometimes. Or no, I talked to him yesterday evening. And okay. I talked to him yesterday. But you guys got to understand, this is just one. I've sat in courtrooms in at least 12 different states, at least probably 70 different courtrooms. And I've heard at least 70 different judges say, the Constitution doesn't apply, not my courtroom. Don't talk about that in my courtroom. This is the audacity and the arrogance that exists, and the apostasy of our beliefs and our values and our faith that is just being destroyed by these pieces of shit that want to make a bunch of money and make us call them honorable. And you guys are criminals. And if you guys want to remain and continue to do things while you're doing it, I'm going to make damn sure that every single person knows that you're a criminal. And as a result, you will not be in office. You will have no power. And I imagine that you might have a hard time even keeping your life, because you don't want to mess with the American people. We're not the nicest group of people in the world. We have a very, very dark history. We come from a penal colony. If you wake this beast up, I've been warning you, don't wake her. Don't wake this, because if you wake this beast up, you're going to find something to come upon you that you will swear the gates of hell couldn't contain it. And indeed, you would be right. Because this nation, it might be sleeping, but it ain't dead.
Yeah. Are you going to go serve someone right now?
Yeah. I gotta go serve. So let me.
Okay. I'm going to take you out for a moment. That's the thing, Tom. I had a case that I took to small claims. Even though it was an associate circuit court judge, I took it through the small claims. And you had mentioned Marbury versus
Marbury v. Madison.
Thank you, Madison. And I actually did use a portion of that. There was a segment of that particular block. And the judge did look at me. He said, Mr. Cooper, I respect your right, your Second Amendment right, and I do respect what you've said about Marbury versus Madison. But the bottom line is, you signed an agreement with the governor, with the covenances and covenances and governorship, bylaw governorships of the HOA. Thus, therefore, we cannot adjudicate on your behalf. So it's like my HOA is a separate country in the United States and doesn't follow the laws of.
They make it appear as if HOAs are their own separate political subdivision.
Yep.
And part of the problem we have, not only in Missouri but in many states, Tanawah made the comment about how it is that all legislative duties fall within the Congress. They're the only ones that can pass laws. We have the same thing here in Missouri under the legislative article in the state constitution, that all legislation is from the House and the Senate. Now, we have a structure within the state constitution where we've created charter cities and charter counties to where they're like a home rule. So the governance of those is more along the lines of what the locals want, in so long as they still follow the Constitution. We've got so many counties and so many cities in this state that passes their own laws without the permission being granted to them from the legislative branch. It's not even funny, and they throw people in jail for those things, knowing full well that they can't. You can't just up and create. The courts have opined that ordinances, rules, regulations, they're all the same as laws. Well, if all laws must start within a House or the Senate or the Assembly or the Congress or the legislative branch, whatever it is that you want to call it, well, then these political subdivisions are out so far outside the parameters of the Constitution, it's not even funny.
Yeah. There was a comment up here, and I think I'd like, since we've got the moment to do it, I want to put this down. Oren Stone had said, courage is only required when facing that which we fear, don't understand. No one escapes the base model configuration, and he has a hashtag governing dynamics, and not the human condition and not the situational existence. And the civil liberties, no one can be expected to walk in what they cannot see. Stumble, yes, but walk, not so much. So he has this, like this public, I want to say the public trust advocacy forum or format that he has shared with me on the common denominator page. And it's where more laws do not make less criminals. They're not designed to. And besides, criminals don't obey laws, neither do they fear the cameras, and not on every corner of the nation and globe even. But criminals do fear tactical response. And in this case, the way the lawyers, politicians, and litigators fear. And again, he has a couple more. That's why a public trust advocates are voracious proponents of homeschooling, distance education, farming, and settlement, so on and so forth. What do you think about the possibilities of having something as such, a public trust advocacy? I mean, something that's kind of distant from the two-party system, distant from the judicial or the legislative. What do you think about the possibilities of that? Or do you think it might not even work altogether?
I actually know some people who are in the process of doing this, and I've been invited to a meeting on Sunday to find out exactly how it works. I have been invited to their bi-weekly meetings that are held about 45, 60 miles from me, but I've never been able to get back in town in time to attend these meetings. But the whole concept, I believe, based on my knowledge, and I could be wrong, and if I'm speaking outside the realm of my knowledge, then I'm the only one who's guilty of it. But I believe what they are attempting to do is to create something within the the confines of the United States that is more like a Indian nation, except it's made up with citizens of. You're not giving up your citizenship.
Mm-hmm.
Matter of fact, when I was born in Baltimore, Maryland, that made me a citizen of Maryland. When I went and was moved to Pennsylvania, that made me a citizen of Pennsylvania. When I moved to Missouri, that made me a citizen of Missouri. Some bunglehead decided to pass the 14th Amendment and said, oh, no, you're not a citizen of the state anymore. You're a citizen of the United States of America. No, I prefer to be a citizen of the state of Missouri. I prefer to be a citizen of the state that I reside in. Yes, I reside in the country that is known as the United States of America, but all 50 states were set up to be sovereign with cooperative agreements among one another. That makes me a citizen of the state in which I reside.
Well, if they're going to be in cooperation with one another, then that's where, and correct me if I'm wrong or out of the box, wouldn't that be where you would want to have that? I always like to say, zoop de jury. Isn't that where we want to be led through a more of a jury selection of people that help assist in the process?
Well, I think part of the problem is we've been adjudicated to make sure that we do not understand what the jury system is for. We do not understand what the grand jury is for. Based on my 2 years of taking constitutional law, I would say we do not understand what the Constitution is for, because they were not discussing what was in the Constitution. They were discussing what was contained in precedent law. So if a judge says, a judge says, a judge says, and you have to abide by what the judge says. Well, I'm sorry, the judge is wrong.
Yes.
If the judge says XYZ, but the Constitution says ABC, the judge is incorrect. ABC wins that battle. We don't have enough people knowledgeable in those concepts to take that to, I think, to the extreme, because there's a small percentage of let me call them liberty advocates, who I think they decide they're going to sit on a fence and they're going to be for liberty when liberty benefits them, but they're going to be a statist whenever they see that liberty may not impact them directly, but it could impact others that they disagree with. And there's nothing I hate worse than somebody who is part-time liberty and part-time statist. And that's where you get into the discussion of the right to travel. Why am I required to have a driver's license if I'm not involved in interstate commerce? Why do people believe that my rights come from a written document known as the Bill of Rights, which is an amendment to the United States Constitution? Why do people believe my rights come from Article 1 of the Missouri Constitution? You know, there were firearms before there was a United States Constitution. You had the right to assembly, you had the right to association, you had the right to religion. You had all these rights prior to them all being written down on a piece of paper. And you can go back and find people who have written about this thing time and time and time again. But I've read too many judicial opinions. Tanawah calls them rulings. I like to call them opinions, because it states in the opinion of. We've got too many of these opinions that the judicial branch believes that our rights are descended upon us from a governmental entity. That's why they can take your kids away from you if you're not doing what it is that the court says you must do. That's why they can take away your property if the courts and you're not doing what it is that the legal jargon has been set up for you to follow. We've got the system completely upside down. We're supposed to be at the top of the pyramid, not at the bottom.
Yeah. And that's how it feels. I mean, and again, it feels like we are the people. We, the people, are being suppressed. We're being oppressed by administrative law. That we're being forced to be. We're being forced to be governed by laws that, in this case here, a judge or a ruling or an opinion that a judge says this is how it has to be, and it's sometimes way out of the purview. I know in my case, it's out of it was out of the purview of the Constitution. It was just completely wrong.
Well, if you read the U.S. Constitution, there's only like 4 areas where there should be what are considered federal laws, maybe 3: conspiracy, piracy, treason. I think there's one other one, and if there's not, then I'm thinking something different. But other than that, everything came under the judication of the states. The states can create laws that say I'm not allowed to murder you, and should I decide to murder you, then they have a penalty or a punishment for me for violating your rights. I often ask myself now when I drive down the highway and I see somebody pulled over with a cop behind them, my first question that I think to myself is, I wonder whose rights they were violating.
Yeah, and they have it seems like they have quite a few angles to go after someone.
Yeah, and last time I was pulled over by an officer he was a really nice guy. He was polite. He flat out asked me, he said, "Mr. Martz, I caught you doing 65 and a 55. I said, "Well, I don't think you did. I think you caught me doing 65 and a 60. He says, "No, it used to be 60. Now it's 55. We lowered the speed limit due to blah, 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 blah," which is absolute bull. He says, but, and we had a little conversation. He says, "Now, before I go back to check your identification, were you wearing a seatbelt when I pulled you over?" And I said, "Officer, not only was I not wearing a seatbelt when you pulled me over, but I will not be wearing a seatbelt when you allow me to go after you give me the citation." And he kind of chuckles and laughs and says, "Well, you're being honest." He walks back to the car. He runs my info. He comes back. He says, "I'm just going to give you a warning ticket." I said, "Okay, thank you." I said, "But by the way," I said, since we're being honest here, I said, "I think we have a good enough rapport that I can ask you this question." I said, "Whose rights am I violating, and why am I pulled over on the side of the highway?" He says, "Well, I pulled you over for violation of the law." I said, "Well, did you or did you not swear an oath to the Missouri Constitution?" He said, "I did." I said, do you remember exactly what that oath contained?" "Well, I agreed to abide by the Missouri Constitution, the United States Constitution, and all the laws of the land. So I have in my car, I have these little laminated strips of Article 1, Section 2, which specifically states that the proper function of government is to secure the rights of life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, the gains of your own industry, that there's equal protection under the law, and that I forget exactly how it's worded, but anything outside those parameters is a failure in government's chief design." So I handed him one. I said, "Here, have you read this before?" And he looks at it and says, "No, where did you get that at?" And I held up a state constitution. I said, "Out of the document you swore an oath to."
What did he say to that?
Well, at that point in time, he has to admit defeat, because most people, like I'll admit, and I would bet Tanawah would admit as well, when he swore his oath to join the military, I had no clue of what I was signing, what I was taking an oath to. It's become the pomp and circumstance now.
Yes.
That you stand up there, you raise your right hand, you put your left hand on a Bible, you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, help you God. You take your oath to the Constitution, whatever it is that they specifically state, and they also tell you that you have the right to disregard an unconstitutional order. Well, ain't none of us know what's in the Constitution. We weren't taught that when we were in school. Yeah, they told us what they told us what the Tax Act was. They told us what the Stamp Act was. They told us why the T ended up being in Boston Harbor, but they never really deeply delved into those things. And I determined somewhere in the late 80s that my first 12 years of education, I didn't learn a darn thing. I learned more after I got out and I started going down these little rabbit holes. And I started reading, and I had this buddy of mine who back in California, and I've got one here that does the same thing. He says, well, Tom, in order to figure out where you need to go, you got to go back to the beginning. Back to the beginning, back to the beginning, back to the beginning. Well, then you got to go back to the Magna Carta. You got to go back to all these different novels and these books and people who were writing about the way things were back in that time frame, what it meant, back in the time frame that it was written, which is what we need to do with the Constitution. Those words need to be taken back to the original time frame of when they were written. We don't get to completely redefine the words the whole way up to 2024 and then go, oh, by the way, those words that were written in 1791 now have the same meaning as we've defined it in 2024. And that's what we do in the legislative branch, and that's also what we do in the judicial branch.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, I think we've made it where it's almost complicated, too complicated. And I made this statement to you. I believe I made this statement to you. I know I did today to another friend of mine for sure. But it seems like every law that is passed, be it on a state level or the federal level, it appears as though they just take away another right of the people. It appears that way. And as you and Tanawah were just now, you guys are both mentioning, the judge has the supreme, or so it seems, has the supreme, and that's it. It's his way. We're seeing that right now in Trump's case, where he's actually scolding a very scholarly man, respectful man, and all this man did was roll his eyes. And the judge says, are you also trying to stare me down? And the judge is threatening him with contempt for both rolling his eyes and perhaps possibly the judge's perception that he is staring the judge down. It appears as though at this point, with me listening to just that today, from what went on last week on the news, this is, mind you, I'm only getting it from the news. It appears as though the judges almost sit there as if they are a god, a lord, a king. And in fact, someone said to me, why must we stand up? All rise. Why must someone stand up because a judge walks into a room?
Because you're to honor them. That's also why they are referred to as your honor.
So you just said what? They are the owner to us.
No, you refer to them. The reason that you stand up is to honor them. That's the way the courts have been set up. Why do you think you look up at a judge?
Yes, they always look down because they're sitting at a seat of higher power.
When you go to these different committee hearings, like in Congress, if you watch the videotapes, those people are always setting up higher than the people who are testifying. It's to give the air of authority. They rule over you. I mean, a decade ago, when I ran for city council down here, the local newspaper asked me what my first action would be if I got elected to city council. And I said, I would change the height of the podium from which the people speak. And the lady doing the article said, well, I don't understand. I said, well, as a city council person, The person that I am, the person who directs me, the person who is my boss, is that person who's speaking from the podium. Their position should be higher than my position. I am to honor them. They are not to honor me. And to have me sitting up higher than they do gives the air of authority to me, when in reality, the air of authority goes to the person who's standing behind the podium. That is the individual to which it is that A, I need to listen to, but B, it doesn't mean I have to agree with them, because my oath, after all, was to defend the Constitution, not to give a senior citizen eyeglasses simply because she couldn't afford it.
Mm.
And that's where we have gone completely awry and completely astray, as we try to create these little niche groups to which politicians can benefit certain groups to get that voting block on their side. I just want to see the first person who's ever been in any government employment, who's ever created the mechanism by which they made it so that their department was never needed again. And you're not going to find that.
Yeah. You're right. I'll tell you what, Tom, this was I wish I could have gotten him here. I wish I don't know how much of it you caught, or I know on my end, I had a couple glitched areas where I didn't get to hear him clearly, but thank goodness the better part of it did come out as such. I like you to close in this case for Tanawah, and I'm saying that close for Tanawah and close with Tanawah, and to close this program. What do you see? What do you possibly foresee in knowing now what he's doing? And maybe I should ask you, do you have a good grasp? But I'm sure you do, correct?
Yeah, I kind of understood what it was that he was doing. My whole issue with him and you both, and I don't want you to take this personally.
Sure.
What it is that you and I have talked about, it is so convoluted to understand that it literally takes you sitting down face to face and drawing out a timeline. Tanawah is an individual who, and this is my perception, this doesn't mean that it's the way he is, but it's the way that I've perceived him when I hear him talk. I think he is of the assumption that everybody, rightly or wrongly, should have all the grasp and the knowledge that he has had through his research. I fall into that mechanism too. There are times I look at people and I just want to go, are you stupid? Why do you not understand this? I've only been talking about this on the radio for the last 11 freaking years. Where have you been? But we have a tendency to get complacent in our knowledge, thinking that everyone else is just as knowledgeable as what it is that we are. And one of the things that when I first got into this back in the mid 80s, one of the guy who really got me heading off in this route would always tell me that when you walk past a mirror, he said, I want you to stop and go, I'm the reason this is this way. And I started doing it. Then after about 3 weeks, I went, why am I doing that? He said, because you are the reason that it's this way. You're ignorant enough in your own education to think you know what it is that has transpired when you know nothing. And I'm still at that point. I have, oh, Tom, but you're a state constitution expert. No, I'm not. What I do is I pick the Constitution up and I read it and I read it and I read it and I read it. You don't become a Super Bowl winning quarterback by throwing one football. You throw it millions of times. You don't become a constitutional expert by simply reading the Constitution once. I had a discussion a while back at a political venue that I was at, where I was listening to this guy who wants to be a judge, and he was talking to this this elderly couple that was sitting to my left, and they also had their grandson with them. They were probably about 10 years my senior. And I'm just sitting there, I'm absorbing it. I try to abide by the you have 2 eyes, 2 ears, and 1 mouth. So you observe and listen twice as much as you talk, unless somebody wants you to talk. So I'm sitting there, I'm listening, and I'm grasping what it is that he's talking about. And he looks at me and he says, "So, Tom, what do you think?" "What do you mean, what do I think?" He says, "Well, what do you think about the conversation we're having?" I said, "Well, if you don't mind my asking, you're running for judge, right?" "Yeah." So when was the last time you picked up and read the state constitution? And his comment to me was, "Does that really matter?"
Wow.
I went, Wait a minute. What do you mean, does it really matter?" we have got to get we have got to get more people who are as educated as Tanawah. We need to get as many people as possible who is educated to whoever the smartest person is that you know on whatever it is that you're looking to educate yourself on. You need to duplicate yourself. Then that person needs to duplicate themselves, and that person needs to duplicate themselves. We are so far outside the parameters of not knowing what to do. That's why I kept trying to get him to explain, how do you go about writing something like that up to the point where, instead of them only having like one of these like every 2 to 3 years, that maybe there are thousands of these things delivered annually, naming every single person in office who has violated the rights of an individual, and just make it consistent, make it, consistency. The group that I help in Oklahoma, that they go to the Oklahoma Supreme Court, and they have laws that have violated the Constitution thrown out. That's all they do. They have become experts at that. We have a gentleman here in Missouri by the name of Ron Calzone. That's what he does. He'll pick 1 or 2 pieces of legislation. He'll take it to the Missouri Supreme Court and get it thrown out because it's unconstitutional. We need more people like that. And then we also need those people to learn how to navigate and to discuss with one another what it is that they're doing, so you don't keep trying to reinvent the wheel to do something is already being done, unless you can figure out a way to improve it and make it better.
And really, I like saying this of myself, and it's really, I really shouldn't. A lot of times I make this approach, which is I'm the and I hate saying this at this point because I was thinking about the quote, but I feel like sometimes I'm okay with being the one, there you go, the one that's not as educated, the one that's stupid in the room, in hopes that I will learn something. And I will say, on most of these podcasts that I've done with people, I have to tell you, I walk away always much more enlightened, one way, shape, form, or another. But I think a lot of it also, and you said it very eloquently when you said that Tanawah really has a good grasp, educationally speaking, to the law. But it's, how do you make it where it's easy enough for the layman, the average person, the common person, to understand it and grasp it? I've got a friend of mine, sometimes when he speaks to me about school policy, he was talking to me today about some things that are happening, and really came down to election tampering. And it took about 3 times for me to hear it before I fully understood it, because some people can present it in ways that, again, a common person can comprehend. But the other thing is, there's so many people that could care less. I mean, across the board, I think the American people care less. They place their trust into the judicial system. Well, I'll walk in here and plead no contest, or I'll plead down to a lesser charge, so it's not a felony but a misdemeanor, and I can get this behind me. I can move on with my life. When in reality, they don't realize what they've just done. When they go to move on with that plea bargain, Now they've got a record, people can see it, and the next you know, you've got problems. Yet because people, the society does that judgment on you and around you, just based upon the fact that, and I'll say it like this: a harassment charge can be brought down, a felony harassment can be brought down to a public nuisance or a disorderly conduct. Well, then everyone in society says, well, wait a minute, if it was a harassment charge, how did it get down to this? And what is it all about? But you're still labeled because, even though you took the lesser charge of being a goofball for the night. I'm just throwing that out there because people don't want to. I just feel that they just don't want to stand up and fight enough for themselves in a courtroom.
Most people are not like Donald Trump. They can't afford to spend a night in jail. They can't afford to spend a week in jail. They can't afford to even basically appear in court with a public defender, because you're right. The public defender's first thing is, well, let's plea bargain it down.
Yeah.
Well, wait a minute. I thought you were supposed to defend me. No. That's not what my position is. My position is to make it so that you don't have to serve any time. And we can do that with this plea bargain. Here, just sign your rights away to the judicial system, and then you can go on about your life if nothing ever happened. This concept that we have been told that you are innocent until proven guilty seems to be something that, through all my reading and observation, I don't think that's ever been a thing in our judicial system since this country's been founded.
Well, I know myself and my experiences, and I know you're well aware of my scenario, of which I have no problem at all discussing even publicly with you. And I know you know that of me. I had said this about my situation, which was the stuff that Trump is going through. We're labeling it like lawfare on the political side because it's keeping him, grounded in New York City. He can't get his message out, campaigning for the position of president. As far as but we call it, from the lawfare side, we also call it a witch hunt. In other words, they have thrown a charge on him, and yet they haven't proven any weight on their side to say this is what you've done. And they did that with me as well, because my warrant turned into a trial by affidavit, and I was guilty until I was proven innocent. In this case, they dropped the charges. There was nothing there. It was the opinion of an officer who usurped her authority, violating, in this particular case right here with Tanawah is fighting, the U.S. Code 18. I mean, you can't do that. I mean, you can. And like I said to you earlier, I don't have a lot of money at all. But I'll tell you what, I wasn't going to plea bargain to a public nuisance, disturbing the peace, anything. I did nothing wrong. And I think if more people take that approach, knowing they actually did nothing wrong, I think we could probably flop the system. We could probably readjust what's going on in the jail system. Even not that guy's not going to jail. That woman's not going to jail. They fought their case, and they were either found innocent or the charges are dismissed.
But I think most people have an inherent fear of the judicial system. And once you get it's like a fear of heights, people a fear of flying, a fear of water. We have been educated to believe somewhat that we should have a fear of the judicial system, not so much in what we've been told, because we've been told that we have the best judicial system in the country. It's not perfect, but it's the best one available to us. But we see what happens to people like a Randy Weaver, a David Koresh, and the Lavoy Finicum, the Bundys. I mean, there's a long list. Look at the Kent University students for protesting the Vietnam War. this goes on and on and on and on and on. And I think we have a reasonable, people now have a reasonable fear of what happens to them when they get involved in the judicial system, because they know for a positive fact the judicial system can take everything from them.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, Tom, I want to thank you for coming on. I know it was a bit of a struggle, a hit and miss with a lot of the audio with Tanawah driving. I want to thank you because and I think it's only been since about August, I believe, is when I met you, or July or August. And I will tell you, I have much respect for you. You've taught me a lot, and I thank you. You've guided me. You've given me that support and encouraged me. And I think it's people like yourself that we all have to do that for one another. And if we can rub that off, if I could take what you've given me and share and give that to someone else, and it's successful, that's where I know I've done something right. And I just want to let you know, sir, being in my life, you've done something right for me. And I thank you very, very, very much.
You know, I always tell people, even the people that I disagree with, I always learn something from everybody I run into. And I think if you can take that away, even the people that you disagree with, if you can take away and learn something from people that you adamantly disagree with, then you're a much better individual for being able to do that. And I like this Oren Stone dude. I don't know who he is or who she is, but
He is a wonderful person.
Huh?
He's a wonderful person. He and I met several months back, and he's been a very, very, very big supporter of me, of what we're doing, of what I'm going through. He knows everything like you, and probably even a little bit more, Tom, only because I try to limit, because I value your time. I try to limit. If I could, I'd probably call you at least 2 times a week, maybe 3. And if we live closer, I'd say, let's have a beer every other night. That's how much I like you. And Oren is exactly the same way. And I can't even begin to tell you, he's a very humbling man. He's a very brilliant, brilliant man. And he's got a lot of fire and a lot of passion. And he believes in what he's been doing and going through. And believe me, this man has gone through hell. And he's come out the other side. Broken a bit, like we all get, no doubt, but he's a really good guy, and I appreciate you actually saying that. Oren is a wonderful person, and I will ask him if it's possible to maybe exchange emails, let you know, and you guys can get to, because I think you would really benefit from him as well. I know I have.
Well, you know, it's not the trip to the bottom that you make judgments. It's how you get up off of the bottom and go about what it is that you need to do. And there are people who've gone to the bottom and they've stayed there, and you know darn well that the system has defeated them. But there's also been people who have dropped to the bottom, who have slowly but surely clawed their way back up, who deserve the respect, or who, in my opinion, probably would earn the respect of anybody that they run into, just based on conversations that they have. And this Oren Stone person seems like one of those individuals.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much, Tom, for coming on. And I know your time is very valuable. Believe me, folks, when I say I feel very blessed and honored to have this man on my program, it's not fluff. It ain't kissing his keister. It's nothing like that. It really is respect. And as much as respect I have for him, I guarantee you, I can say this, and with a nod of a head or an agreement on his part, he has that same respect for the Missouri, for seeing to it that the state of Missouri, follows the law, does the right thing for the people. He does not want to see us abused, and he's in a front line. And again, Tom, I thank you for all of that. I really mean that, and I wish we could talk more often.
Well, you have my number.
I know. And I will be seeing you. You know this. I will be seeing you at the end of the month. I told you I'd come down and see it. I let this man down, by the way. Not going to tell you. I was supposed to have a meeting with a civil rights attorney down in Springfield. That went awry because Tanawah was stranded, and I had to spend quite a few hours trying to help him out. And I felt Tanawah needed me more than I. No offense, Tom, that I needed to see you because I know I can see you in another week or two. So, Tom, thank you for being in my life, and thank you, brother, for everything you do. Listen, what is your time frame? It's Friday mornings, 7 o'clock to 8. Give a plug.
Every Friday except for the last Friday, I am on 104.1 FM. That's KSGF. 104.1 FM, 1260 AM, ksgf.com, from 7 until 8, and we discuss the legislature. We discuss bills that have been passed. We've discussed what parts of the Constitution they violate, and I think Friday I might actually start talking about some of the constitutional amendments that you may see on the ballot come November, because one of these I think is going to turn the county sheriff's department into a ticket writing machine, if I'm reading it correctly.
Wow. Well, I thought the sheriff of Nottingham here in Davies County hated me. I call him the stooge. I guess if the stooge of Nottingham here hated me before, I guess I'm really going to probably be getting a lot of gifts from him, or at least he's going to try to. But Tom, thank you for taking this time. God bless you, sir. I look forward to meeting you definitely next week. I'll be down there. I'm looking at my calendar on the 31st. I told you I'd come down. And I will be joining Tanawah, by the way, in DC. So this is history to making, I believe. I really, truly do. And if nothing else, it's just going to be like a wrecking ball hitting the base of the Empire State Building. I think he's going to do that much damage. I truly do.
It's too bad you couldn't get him on somebody like Alex Jones or Larkin Rose, or somebody that's not so far Republican. It's not funny. Somebody who's not Democrat. It's funny, but somebody who both sides listen to quite a bit. And the only one I can think of off the top of my head would be somebody like an Alex Jones.
Well, you know what? You've given me that advice. I'm going to run with it. Now that you gave me the ball, I caught it. I will run with it for sure. And I did want to ask you if by chance you had a chance to watch Gutfeld last night.
I don't watch TV.
He had Bill Maher on his program.
I can't handle Bill Maher. I mean,
I know
that guy flip-flops more than Belgian waffles in a flip-flopper.
I know, but it was so good to see someone like him, because I understand, and I'm the same way. Not crazy about Bill Maher, but it was good to see him and Greg Gutfeld go back and forth. It really was an extraordinary show. And I did fall asleep in the middle of it only because I was so exhausted. I had like not even 8 hours sleep in 48 hours. And so I'm going to watch it tonight in its entirety. But just the start of the show was good enough for me to get a good laugh out of. But Tom, thank you for coming in here, and I appreciate your time, and I appreciate and value everything you do with Nick Reed and the morning show down there at the KSGF 104.1 FM. Thank you, out of Springfield. Thank you.
You bet. And after I figure out Beyonce's country album, which is no more a country than Britney Spears, I'll have to watch Gutfeld.
You always leave me smiling. Thank you, Tom. You take care, brother.
Have a good evening, man. Talk to you later.
Yes, sir. Peace out. Folks, I am so blessed to be in this time of history where I feel like my world is crumbling around our country. But, we have to make a choice to either continue playing the silly game, winning silly prizes, are standing up and saying, you know what? We don't want to just jump in your little, what is it, cream of corn pool and have this little mud bath slinging. No, you want to drag me in as a contender. I'm going to tell you something personally. The law has tried to bring me in as a contender. Thank goodness I've won with my assistance of an attorney. But I'll tell you what, I'm not just a contender anymore. I'm now a fighter, and I'm going to win. I don't want anything other than first place. I don't want anything other than the blue ribbon. I want nothing than the biggest trophy possible, and I want nothing but the biggest belt to wear. It's called a champion. And folks, I know myself, the people I'm around, we are champions, and we are we are trying to be champions for you. And I mean that. The passions in our hearts to do the right thing, to follow the right procedures, to do the right thing, to protect and serve. Well, believe it or not, folks, I may not get my name on the governor's ballot yet. Trying to do that still. But that's what I want to do. I want to protect and serve the state of Missouri if given that opportunity. I want to thank you all. God bless you for joining me. I really appreciate Kimberly coming on, Ruth coming on, Orrin coming on. And I want to thank everyone for watching and visiting. And please don't think twice. It'll be all right. In the meantime, God bless you. Have a great day. And Godspeed. Love you all. Peace.
a generation of my time. There is nothing we can do.
I was going to say, I sent an email out to Orrin Stone. I hope maybe you'll get that. Thank you. Peace.